The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When the Magi had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you. Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him." Joseph rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that what the Lord had said through the prophets might be fulfilled. "Out of Egypt I call my son." When Herod had died, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Rise, take the child, his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." He rose, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard of the Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go back there. And because he has been warned in a dream, he departed for the region of Galilee. He went and dwelled in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene. The Gospel of the Lord.
Now I looked out over the congregation as we read the second reading to see if anybody was cringing, especially when you hear the words of St. Paul, "Wives, be subordinate to your husbands." In a modern world, it's not even used. We don't even think about that kind of an idea. But we have to understand it in the context, of course, of what St. Paul is talking about here as well. The time we're living in today, of course, have changed much over 2,000 years. But he's approaching this literally from a perspective of military order. And what that means is if you have no general, if you have nobody who's the head, how does your army fight a battle? If you don't have a rank, a system, how does your army fight a battle? It doesn't. So that's the way he's approaching it. Remember that Christianity, if you look back at all the religions on the face of the earth, Christianity was singularly the very first religion, and may still be to this day, that removed a woman being a slave, being subjugated to her husband, where the husband, the man, had absolute control. And even the eldest son, if the husband passed away, had absolute control. A woman in the time of Christ couldn't own property, couldn't have her own money. It had to be entrusted to somebody in her family, a male, that would take care of her. And if they so decided in the government that they wanted her house, they would take it without asking. That's the way they treated women 2,000 years ago, and it's the way they still treat women nowadays all over the world. Many religions still do. And the only reason Paul uses this is not to beat women into submission. But he's using this as a unity, as an expression of unity. There has to be some sort of structure in the family. Of course, the Christian ideal is basically husband and wives are equals, and they communicate and talk things out, and therefore make the decisions. It isn't just, well, my decision, and I don't care what you think. The problem is a lot of marriages today, and of course we're in the same place as the average marriages in the world today. We're at a divorce rate of 52% in the Catholic Church, which is about the average, all other marriages too. But I think the problem is there are arguments and discussions and things where the other is excluded. And decisions are made. Have you ever seen children play their parents? Like a fiddle? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Mom, Mom, Mom. Oh, okay, go ahead. Dad, we can't afford that. You can't do that. The kids know how to play the game. And if you didn't know it before, don't do it now. But the kids know exactly how it works. And if a mother and father have that kind of opposition, sooner or later it's going to destroy the family. It will destroy the children and the couple as well. Because the arguments will only increase and only get worse. The games will only become more serious and more difficult. And hatred enters into the marriage. And there's already a problem that is present in marriage anyways. When we have somebody in our lives that we love, after we spend some time with them, let's say some years, and we kind of have stepped off of the cloud, we're no longer on that cloud level where the honeymoon used to be and the love used to be and all of that. Now we're walking on a concrete floor barefooted, and it's a cold, hard floor. And I've got to deal with my spouse in the middle of all that difficulty. What enters in now is complacency. We get used to each other, and that's it. There's no more love in that sense. There's no more respect. There's no more recognizing the rights of each other. There's no more understanding of being a child of God, that we're supposed to help each other get to heaven. Now it simply comes down to pointing the finger at each other. What did I tell you about don't do that? Stop telling me what to do. And how many times have I had couples in my office over the years? And the very first sentence that comes out, it's his fault, it's her fault, pointing fingers. And I say, stop. When you can't look at yourself first and what you can fix, we can't fix this marriage. Because you've already determined to destroy this relationship by pointing the finger at each other. Of course, yelling at each other, cursing at each other, arguing with each other in front of the kids when they're young, and so on and so on, all becomes a part of it. And we seem to take it very naturally. Like there is no issue, no problem. Then we wonder when our children turn 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, why all of a sudden are they mirroring me? They look just like me when I'm angry. Because a lot of times when I have youngsters come into my confession, and they confess something particular, let's say they got angry and they yelled and, had a fight with their brother or their sister and so on and so on. I always ask them, how old are you? Father, I'm 7. I say, where did you learn this kind of behavior? Oh, my mom and dad, they do it all the time. And then I have to remind the parents, don't. Because what you're going to see as these children get older, you're going to see a spitting image of yourself, and you're not going to like it. If that's the way you're going to treat your children, they're going to turn out sour. They're not going to turn out the way that they're supposed to. Because we've not taught them how to live virtuous lives, how to live holy lives, as our second reading tells us today. Put on us God's chosen ones, holy and beloved. Heartfelt compassion. We've lost compassion. The human being today is angry. Kindness. Where's our kindness today towards each other? Most of all, those are the closest to us. That's the most difficult. Kindness and charity to share. Humility. Humility towards God, towards others, myself. Being humble. Gentleness. Being gentle with each other instead of always yelling and screaming. And patience. That's another thing that's lost in the modern world. We just get frustrated with everything, and we become complacent in our relationship with our spouses and our children. In the end, it will destroy our marriage. And St. Paul reminds us, bear with one another and forgive one another, and that should be done instantaneously. The moment a disagreement happens, forgiveness should follow right behind it. A lot of people hold on to things. They remember things that took place 30 years ago, 40 years ago. They still haven't forgiven it yet. And as long as you carry that unforgiveness in your heart, you will only become more sour within. You'll become more bitter with age. And you'll be an uneasy human being to get along with. So we need to practice it sort of in the beginning as we get together, as we plan our marriage. We need to make some sort of a contract or a deal that, we're going to act in a particular way. We're never going to argue in front of our children. We're going to try to be kind. We're going to be compassionate to each other. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. When that honeymoon phase wears off, that's when the hard part begins. That's when the struggle begins. This is now where I have to live my holiness above all things. This is where I have to make my choices. When I have that loopy feeling and that love feeling and all that sensitivity and everything is easy, it's fine. I don't notice any problems. I don't see a thing. But boy, once you hit that ground, everything is noticeable. The finger pointing is terrible. And it's destroying marriages today left and right, which is sad. This was a human being we once loved, and we loved with everything we had. Now we're standing in front of a judge filled with hatred towards each other. What kind of insanity is that? What happened here? It started with the finger pointing. It started with the hard part of marriage. And oftentimes, I hear the conversations, people say to me, well, that's not the person I married. I said, well, I'm sorry, but it is the person you married, but there's a problem here. You had an image of a person that you married in your mind, but it was not the same person that's in front of you. You married an image of an individual, and this is the way they were going to be. And as a woman, you were going to fix them. Am I right, women? You're going to fix them. You're going to control them. Because they love me. Love. Oh, yeah, love conquers all things. Yeah, they're going to do everything I tell them because they love me. Well, all women know that doesn't work. It might work in the very beginning, the first few months, or whatever, but after that, no. No man wants to be told all the time what to do. But that living in marriage today, in this modern setup, is very, very difficult. You have to practice heroic virtues. You have to be a Christian to a heroic degree. You don't need to be martyred. You don't need to be in a Colosseum, the amphitheaters of Rome. You don't need any of that. Just get married. You'll have a martyrdom for the rest of your life. And you'll become a saint through it. That's the idea. You help each other to grow in holiness. Supposed to. And one spouse has a particular week. Now, I always remind people, when you get married, remember that you're marrying the other person, the whole person. Their family history, their family past, their behaviors, no matter what it is. You're marrying the whole person. And sometimes people come with a tractor-trailer load of stuff that they bring into the marriage, which sometimes a spouse does not know. We try to do everything we can to prepare the human being for the marriage. But somewhere along the way, things do happen. If we can only work our way through it and communicate, and that's the problem today, we don't talk. We sit and watch TV and drink beer while the wife is cooking. We don't communicate. We yell at each other. We know each other's mindset already because we've been married for a long time. And I've seen it many, many, many times. I've been invited to families' homes many times to eat. I've gotten to know some families. I helped raise one particular family and stuff. And I've seen it. I know. It's hard. But there's one thing that we do have. As being married in the Catholic Church, we have a sacrament. Marriage is a sacrament. And one of the beautiful things about the sacrament is God gives us grace to endure and to persevere with all hardships, no matter what there may be. if we're only willing to utilize them. I always like to tell married couples when they get married, choose one of the readings, make a copy of it, enlarge it, frame it, hang it on the wall, the door when you come in, so every time you come in you see it, and every time you leave you see it. Because the one that most people choose is 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient, love is kind, love is merciful, and so on. Everybody chooses that one. I have yet to have a marriage that chooses what we just read today. Wives, be submissive to your husband. That's the modern mentality. You see, no wife is going to do that. But in Christianity, we're not asked to be submissive in that sense. Paul is only approaching this from a military order. In other words, in the end, the result basically is okay. If a decision has to be made, talk about it. But in the end, the man is the head of the household. It's not to lessen the degree of the female in the marriage relationship at all. The idea, hopefully, is that we discuss it and we talk about it for the good of each other. That's what marriage is all about. And to help each other get to heaven. But oftentimes in the modern world, we tear each other down. And we keep each other down. Our children feel it. They know it. They get angry. They get flustered. They get frustrated as they grow up. It just grows within them as well. And they bring it right into their married life as well. It just continues the process. So it's nice to have that mushy feeling of marriage when you first get married, the honeymoon period as it's called. But there is a reality that marriage is very, very difficult and it is hard to live. Today, sanctity comes in a married life. I don't have a wife yelling at me every day. I only hope I could handle it. I can only hope I'd be Christian and I'll be able to deal with it. But, you could say to me, well, Father, it's easy for you to say that, but it's hard to live. I understand all of that, but like I said, I was very close to a family. I watched their children literally come from the womb into the world, 3 of them. They're all now in college. I've watched that family go through everything you can possibly imagine, and I've been there every step of the way. There's nothing that I've not experienced with this family as if it were my own family. And it's been one of the greatest teaching lessons for me personally, because it's taught me a lot. And it allows me, when I talk with married couples or somebody who is preparing them for marriage, I look for certain things and certain behaviors and things that they have not yet talked about that will show up later. So I'm saying this to you today because today, of course, we talk about the Holy Family. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the only holy family to ever have existed, the holiest family of all. I remember a priest one time saying, imagine for a moment what it must have been like to be St. Joseph and have to give Mary a cup of coffee every day. I wanted to throw a rock at him. I said, what's so hard about offering a cup of coffee to your spouse? What's the pain in that? They're a holy family. There was no sin in their relationship whatsoever. It'd be nice if we had that today, but we don't. Because we don't live in a perfect world. We're imperfect creatures. Now, the Catechism gives us sort of an idea of the family in God's plan. Let me just read to you a little bit of this. The community is established upon the consent of the spouses. Marriage and the family are ordered to the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of children. Most important points in married life. The good of 2 human beings. You are good to each other. What does it mean to be a good? I always like to ask kids that question, especially in confession, when they've been angry at mom or dad or their friend. And I say to them, do you love your mother and father? Oh, yes, Father, absolutely. I said, obviously you don't understand what it means to love. To love another human being means to will good to them. I am that good. I will my good towards you. So obviously you don't love your mom and dad. Because by the way you treat them, what you're confessing to me here, your behaviors and so on, says nothing about love. But the same is true for a husband and a wife. You are good to each other. You're supposed to be a good to each other all the days of your life, no matter how hard, no matter how difficult it becomes. You're supposed to be a good, to help each other grow in holiness, praying together, living the faith together. Even if I have a spouse that's not Catholic, to live together in unity to the best of my ability, certainly I have that responsibility. To help my spouse to come closer to Christ, wherever they come from. For it's always about the good of two human beings. And no, it's not about ownership. I did a marriage one time, and this is the honest truth. I did a marriage one time, and I was walking behind a couple. And the man leaned over to the wife, and I heard him clear as day. He said, "Now I own you." I wanted to kick him in his derriere. It's a good thing we were still in church, because I didn't. And I realized at that moment I forgot something. I forgot to teach them. Marriage is not about ownership. You don't own each other. You don't own another human being. Only God has rights over us. There are certain things that are expected of us in marriage, yes. But it's never about ownership. The moment ownership comes into marriage, and I'll show you how it does it. His and her, right? That's how marriage begins to separate itself. It's not ours. It should be ours. But it becomes his separate bank accounts, and so on and so on. Begins to destroy the marriage. And now many couples that do that. And how much they are at odds with each other all the time. I own you because I got the bank account, you don't. We don't own anybody. If you remember the story in the book of Genesis, when God goes looking for Adam, he says, "Adam, where are you?" And finally he comes out. And God says to Adam, "Adam, why were you hiding?" He says, "Oh Lord, I was afraid." What was Adam afraid of? They had been naked the whole time. He was afraid because he was naked. They'd been naked the whole time. But all of a sudden, original sin brought something into the existence of the human being that was not there before, not created by God. All of a sudden, Adam realized that in his nakedness, he could be used by other people, by Eve. No human being wants to be used by anyone. So God dressed them to protect them. He gave them the virtues. He gave them emotions so they could learn to live together in the middle of their brokenness. But that's what happens. We use each other. In a married life, we think we have that right. We have a right to use another human. We have a right to use our children, and so on and so on. We don't. The Catechism makes it very clear. For the good of two spouses in procreation and the education of children. The love of the spouses and the begetting of children create among the members of the same family a relationship and a primordial responsibility. A man and a woman united in marriage. Now, notice what I said, man and woman. I didn't say man and man or Steve and Eve Eve and so on. No, man and woman always united in marriage. Together with their children form a family. That's what the Catechism says. That's what the Catholic Church teaches us. This institution is prior to any recognition by public authorities, which has an obligation to always recognize the family, a man and a woman united. How far we have come from God's law. Man has overstepped every boundary that God has placed into creation. And we accept it like everything is A-okay, and we forget that all of it's going to backbite us. Sooner or later, it's going to backfire on us. If we look at the history of the Roman and Greek Empire, both of them were destroyed within 100 years of approval of homosexuality. Both of them disappeared off of the face of the earth when homosexuality became public. Can I tell you? History proves itself. It's always a man and a woman in marriage. Because the idea, of course, is to have children. And this institution must be recognized as public authority, which has an obligation to consider these as a reference point. And everything must be evaluated from that. It is in creating man and woman that God instituted the human family and endowed it with its fundamental constitution. Its members are persons equal in dignity, and that's the important thing, what I was just talking about earlier. For the common good of the members of the family and of society. Without a family, we have no society. The reason our society is struggling so terribly today is because our families are struggling so terribly today. They're being torn to pieces. And society follows, it's torn to pieces as well. And until we get families back together, we get back to that point of where we live holy lives in a family environment, our society will continue to be destroyed. In the end, it will cave in on itself and we'll have nothing but chaos. So the family necessarily has a manifold responsibility, rights, and duties. So my brothers and sisters in Christ, as we honor the Holy Family today, and I understand, that nobody's perfect. I understand all of that, but you're going to make a lot of New Year's resolutions. Maybe you're going to stop smoking. Maybe you're going to stop eating chocolates. Maybe you're going to slow down on candies. Maybe you're going to start running. Maybe you're going to do this. Doesn't matter. When you get before God, He's not going to put you on a scale and say, oops, you're 2 ounces overweight, you're going to hell. It ain't going to happen. That's a no-no. That's not a possibility. But you will account for your relationship with each other. And even if somebody isn't married, the way we treat other human beings, according to the Christian dignity that is due to every human being. If you want to make a New Year's resolution, begin there.